All right, so today we are really diving deep, like way deep.
Deeper than usual.
Oh, yeah. We're going way back to the 19th century to look at this guy, Robert Knox.
Uh-huh.
He was a Scottish author and like this big traveler. Wrote a whole book about his time in Sri Lanka, which, by the way, was called Ceylon back then.
Right, right.
And the thing is, Knox's work, it really had this lasting impact on, well, how race and stuff was seen in India, especially during the whole British colonial period, you know?
Yeah, definitely a period with lots of complicated legacies to unpack.
Huge, huge impact. So we're going to be looking at some excerpts from a longer piece about Knox, kind of dissecting his theories and trying to figure out how they, well, they basically played a role in shaping India, not just back then, but even like how things are today.
It's wild how these ideas from so long ago can still have such a hold, isn't it?
It really is. It's like, you know, his ideas were kind of like these little seeds that got planted and then boom, they just grew into these massive like trees that still cast a shadow. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. And Knox wasn't some lone wolf out there, right? Like his theories were very much a part of this whole European thing at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like this whole mindset. I don't know what to call it.
Worldview, maybe? Like a whole way of seeing the world, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. Like a lot of people were using race and the idea of racial superiority to, well, justify colonialism everywhere, really.
Basically saying, hey, we're superior, so we get to rule you.
Exactly.
But it's interesting, though, to actually dig into how Knox lays out his theories.
Yeah, for sure.
Like in his book, An Historical Relation of the Island Ceylon, he goes all in on this idea that some races are just straight up better than others.
Oof.
Yeah. And of course, surprise, surprise, Europeans were at the top of that list.
Yeah.
And he actually used this belief, like presented it as science, as a reason for why colonialism was, quote unquote, necessary.
Like it was some kind of natural order. It's just, oh, wow. So like you were saying, Knox was really part of this bigger trend, not just some outlier. But I'm curious, like, how did the British actually put these theories into action in India? Can you give us an example?
Absolutely. One of the most striking examples is how the British looked at traditional Indian communities.
Okay, yeah.
Before the British got there, these communities were super diverse, fluid, people moved between groups, identities weren't so set in stone.
Right.
But then the British came in, and they were all about these rigid categories, like everything had to be defined, separated. So they took these diverse communities and forced them into these narrow racial boxes.
So basically they took something that was like really organic and messed with it.
Yeah, exactly. And get this, they actually tried to justify it by saying, hey, these categories were already there, we're just, recognizing them.
So like it was their way of saying they weren't doing anything wrong.
Precisely. It
Yeah.
was all part of their strategy to control India.
Wow. It's like, imagine this beautiful tapestry, right? All these different threads woven together.
Yeah.
And then someone comes in and starts like ripping it apart, trying to separate the threads, saying, no, these threads belong here, these belong there, like trying to impose this artificial order.
It's a perfect analogy. It's like they were deliberately trying to fragment Indian society.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, this wasn't just a temporary thing. Like the impact of this division, it's still felt today.
Oh, absolutely. It's like the echoes of these actions are still reverberating.
Yeah.
This whole classification system led to the creation of artificial hierarchies, pitting groups against each other when that wasn't necessarily the case before.
Like causing tension and resentment where there didn't need to be any.
Exactly. And beyond the societal level, there was a huge psychological impact as well.
Well, right. Like on an individual level.
Yeah.
How so?
The house. Well, think about it. When you're constantly told you belong to a certain category, a category that's supposedly inferior, you start to internalize that. You start to believe it.
Oh, I see.
It's this phenomenon called internalized discrimination, and that's
Yeah.
one of the most insidious and lasting legacies of colonialism.
Yeah, that's heavy. Like these ideas, even though they were like totally made up, they became this self-fulfilling prophecy almost.
Exactly.
So even though colonialism officially ended, those ideas, they didn't just disappear, did they?
Not at all.
They're like, how do you say, like a stain that's really hard to get out.
A stain, a scar, yeah.
Yeah. But there's some hope, right? Like you mentioned earlier that there's a movement happening now to kind of push back against this.
Yeah, absolutely. There's this really powerful movement in India right now that's all about reclaiming their own history, their own narrative.
That's awesome.
It's amazing, actually. It's about going back to their roots, celebrating the diversity that was always there, and rejecting those imposed divisions.
So like redefining what it means to be Indian, basically.
Exactly. It's about rediscovering that unity amidst all the diversity. It's pretty inspiring.
It really is. And I think, even though Knox's ideas were so harmful, his story is a good reminder for all of us, right?
Hmm.
Like it shows how important it is to think critically,
Oh, for sure.
especially about the things we're told, especially when those things are coming from people or institutions in positions of power.
We have to be skeptical, always asking questions, digging deeper.
Exactly. We can't just accept things at face value. We have to, like you said, dig deeper, figure out where the information is coming from, what biases might be there, and all that.
Totally. It's all about being informed and aware.
So, to our listeners out there, I'll leave you with this. Think about Knox, and think about all the ways that history, even the parts that have been debunked, are still shaping our world today. What narratives have you accepted without questioning them? And what can you do to be a more critical thinker? That's something to chew on.
Food for thought, indeed.